father herself is finally here, so let's talk about it. Hello there, Flip here, and today we are going to be doing a dive into Arlecchino's kit based on what was just dreamed, and we'll be giving an overview of said kit and explaining how it works as well as some of her synergies, and any problems concerning her kit, as well as how strong she will be overall. But before we do that, as always, if at any point during the video you're entertained or informed, make sure to drop a like and even consider subscribing, as I'll cover Arlecchino in detail with multiple videos, so you might want to stick around for that. But enough yapping, let's dive straight into her kit. Arlecchino is a 5-star pyro polearm character, and literally everything in her kit is aimed at being your main damage dealer that primarily focuses on doing AoE damage and mostly against mobbing content due to her blood debt mechanic and her bond of life mechanic. Yes, like what some of the Fontaine craftable weapons have. So let's explain those first, as it makes the rest of her kit make more sense. Everyone's favorite dad has a special talent to where she literally just can't be healed, so fuck your Yao Yaos, your Jeans, your Bennetts. Wait, actually bring Bennett back, you are going to want him for the attack buff. She also has something unique to a character called a bond of life, and it's good that she can't be healed as this would erase it. The best way to explain a bond of life in general is that it's kind of like its own separate HP pool that your characters can access. And in Father's case, when you have 30% or more of your bond, that will give her a pyro infusion, and when you hit enemies in this state, her attacks is multiplied by your current bond of life, so the more bond you have, the more damage you will do. So now, the question comes in, how do you get this bond of life percentage up? And shh, be patient, we're getting there. With Arle's skill, she will clear any bond you currently have, and heal from that, which should most likely be 0% on your first rotation, and around 30% afterwards. And then she will do a targeted dash at the enemy and a big slash, all of which should have a pretty sizable AoE. And for every enemy hit, they will get a mark called blood debt attached to them, which tangent, but is insane logic. Imagine someone rushes you down in real life and then you are in debt to them, but I digress. This blood debt will do damage every 3 seconds, but only 3 times. So after 9 seconds, it will stop ticking, I assume, or it might be after 6 seconds if the blood debt does an initial instance of damage. And if you do a charge attack on an enemy with this debuff, you will gain the bond of life from them. How much you get will depend on the stage of this debt they are at, which is unlocked by her A1, all of which are gated by 3-second timers. The first stage will give you 20% bond when you do a charge attack, stage 2, which occurs after 3 seconds, will give you 25% bond, and stage 3, which occurs after 6 seconds, will give you, holy fuck, 70% bond. So you really want to wait those 6 seconds, as the scaling is so extremely drastic. If you kill an enemy, that will also result in you getting 70% bond. And just to note, gaining a bond of life by doing a charge attack from enemies can only go up to 80%. So even if multiple enemies have a bond of life and you do a charge attack on multiple of them, you will still only cap out at 80%. But defeating enemies and using her burst, which is just a big nuke and gives 15% bond, should be able to push you over this 80% cap. And the last thing about her base kit to cover is that her A4 gives up to 20% damage resistance for every 100 points of attack over 1000. Oh, with that mouthful done. Okay, right off the bat, the way you're going to want to rotate with dad is to start with your skill and then switch to your other supports, which should take well over the 6 seconds needed to get to stage 3 of your blood debt, and therefore when you go on field and charge attack, you will gain over 70% bond. The first issue that comes into play is that you need to stay over 30% bond for your infusion, and in scenarios where you can't kill enemies very fast, that isn't possible, whether that is bosses or really tanky elite enemies. Using her burst and assuming you don't kill enemies, that is around 19 attacks. But if you don't use your burst, that is around 14 attacks. You also have to keep in mind that as you keep attacking, you are doing less and less damage as your combos go on if you don't get a bond top up. And this is a drastic decrease when you get to the lower bond margins. She blows her load extremely fast, so for sustained fights where you aren't constantly killing enemies, she won't feel the best. But in those first few attacks, she will feel amazing. It's the equivalent of receiving the most heavenly divine sheet gripping backshots, but then they end up climaxing immediately. The second issue that comes into play is survivability. After your first rotation, you should be able to heal for around 30%, while she also has a pretty good amount of damage resistance built into her kit. But is that going to be enough, considering she can't be healed at all from external sources? And due to her damage problems when facing tankier enemies, unless your Arlecchino is highly invested, you probably can't just slap on a shielder and just tank your damage potential. It also doesn't seem like she has any she doesn't have any interruption resistance built into her kit either, so getting off optimal combos might be a pain in the ass. And also another thing I find funny, if you kill an enemy before reusing your skill, say goodbye to that 30% heal. And if you want to use Furina to reignite her PTSD, or for your sick Arle Fury fantasies, again, again, that is just more survivability lost as she can't heal. Speaking of that, actually, you can't really use non-team IT healers with Arlecchino and Furina, as you'll be getting no fanfare generation past your first rotation. And well, I guess this is a segue to talk about her teams and synergies. The first thing I thought of is of course the standard vape teams. Her charge attacks are going to have no ICD, and she has to weave in normal attacks before doing a charge attack anyways. She also most likely isn't going to run into applying too much pyro like Hu Tao, as her pyro DOT is done when she isn't on the field. Her best vape teams to no one's surprise is going to be Furina, Zhonyan, and Plunge. Her highest multiplier is her Plunge, and it also saves stamina, though any of the other vape variants should also do well. The only problem I can think of with vape teams is that, well, Arlie is an AoE damage dealer, Jingqiu and taller Jingqiu don't really have consistent AoE application, and Furina also needs grouping for her to be consistent. This is again why I think Zhonyan teams will be the best, as she throws the Hydro Auras in an AoE, and you can get somewhat consistent AoE vape charge attacks there. But if you want less hassle, as much as it pains me to say it, Chevreuse teams look very good. I don't know why, but I feel like super fancy when I say these names like Arlecchino or I'm gonna stop. You get consistent AoE Pyro Shred, and Chevreuse does this off field assuming you have Official on the team. Chevreuse also helps with energy, so you can consistently get her burst up more often and do the longer 19 attack combos. So for ease of use and the best mix of AoE and single target, because Zhonyan teams will perform better in ST, Chev teams most likely will be your best bet. But against enemies that can be knocked back, you may have problems hitting targets, as you also won't have grouping. Speaking of grouping actually, the last archetype I can think of is Mono Pyro teams. It's basically just Chevreuse teams with grouping and more AoE, because you can use jangling instead of Official. And I can see this shining on Monolith content in floor 11. Overall, Arlecchino has a good variety of teams. If you want a more in-depth look into them, make sure to drop a comment down below. I guess I'll end off the video by talking about her comparisons to Hu Tao and how I feel about her in general, talking about her place in the meta. Because for personal opinions, I'm excited for Arlecchino, but I'm more excited for Chlorant. Back to Dad. A lot of people had this notion that Arlie would be Hu Tao power creep, and that isn't really the case. Hu Tao has better sustained single target damage and is going to be much easier to pilot, as they are both basically performing the same combos, but Hu Tao has interruption resistance built into her kit. And Arlecchino having better AoE isn't even a massive upside, as Hu Tao has Zhonyan teams which have amazing area coverage. And Arlecchino's AoE is only going to be better if she can consistently kill enemies, like in multi-wave content for example. For bosses with summonable entities, I guess Arlie can also perform well there, but no, Arlie isn't this Hu Tao pyro creep everyone expected her to be, though she does have more team flexibility if that's what you were after. And for Father's overall meta placement, she's just another pyro damage dealer. Her mechanics and playstyle seem extremely interesting, one of the most unique kits we have, but as it stands now, she is pretty in line with the power level of 5-star DPS units we've received in Fontaine. She's going to excel in multi-wave content and be pretty solid everywhere else, though again, the longer it takes to kill enemies, the less good she will feel. I didn't even get the time to dive into her insane constellations either, some of the best in the game, but that'll be for another video. And with that, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on Father's kit, as I'd love to hear it and I respond to almost every single comment. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.